All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber in for Chris Cuomo. It has been 9 days since conservative activist Charlie Kirk was assassinated in cold blood, doing what he did best, engaging in college-age kids in debate at a university in Utah. And there have been vigils all over the country, but it is this Sunday, nearly 100,000 people are expected to attend Charlie's memorial service at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. Now, the security, the safety of the event speakers, which include the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, to name a few, and its attendees, that is a serious concern. So much so, the Department of Homeland Security gave this memorial a level 1 special event assessment rating. Did you know that is the same level reserved for events like the Super Bowl? This is a very big deal. This stadium can seat up to 73,000 max. Entry is going to be on a first-come, first-served basis. Yesterday, federal law enforcement agencies said that they were tracking several threats of unknown credibility against people planning to attend the memorial. That is concerning. We're going to talk about it. Before we even get into how officials plan to keep that event safe, I want to bring in NewsNation's chief Washington anchor, Leland Vittert, who is outside Turning Point USA headquarters. He's going to be covering the memorial all on Sunday. Leland, it's great to see you. I was just talking about this with Elizabeth. First of all, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? But I think the bigger point is, isn't there a deeper meaning here? After the public assassination of Charlie Kirk in a public event attended by 3,000 people, to have a public memorial service like this, I think it goes deeper than just the love and appreciation for Charlie Kirk.
Sure, and I think we know that this is a turning point in American politics. We just don't know exactly what the turning point will be and where it goes from here. To your point, the legacy of Charlie Kirk is that the president and the vice president will come to eulogize him. We have gone back and cannot find a time the vice president and the president traveled somewhere to eulogize someone who was not also a president. That is the level of Charlie Kirk's significance in the American political system. And I think if you look behind me, this extends now for about 500 or 600 feet of American flags, balloons, but more significantly, it extends along the entire Turning Point USA campus. Charlie Kirk started Turning Point USA from whole cloth, from nothing, okay, in about 2012, 2013. I remember covering him when he was just a kid running around trying to raise money, and this is what it is turned into. The power of this, I don't think we really understood in life of Charlie Kirk, and now in death, we are seeing that. In terms of the security, your point, this is very similar, Jesse, to when you go to a political convention, the RNC or the DNC. Once the Secret Service takes over an event and owns an event, that's pretty standard for a president and vice president being together. The Secret Service sort of even tightens things down more when the two of them are together. The fact that the stadium is not open air, it's a closed roof stadium indoors, that makes life a lot easier for the Secret Service, and they feel a lot better about something like that. I would say to you, for the people coming, there's probably no safer place on earth to be on Sunday than inside that stadium.
That's what I was wondering, and that's something that we're going to talk about right now. Leland, thank you so much. You stay safe. Great reporting. Again, Leland's going to cover it all on Sunday for NewsNation. Good seeing you. All right, so now I want to talk about how this massive event is actually going to be kept secure. So joining me right now, two of the best, Dan Donovan, founder and CEO of Stratoscope. It's a firm that specializes in security for larger events, and former Secret Service Special Agent Paul Eckloff. Great to have you both here. Dan, I'll start with you. My understanding is you have sources on the ground that are giving you an insight into the strategy about how they're going to protect everyone there, including some very big names.
Right. We've got, look, you're bringing 70,000 people to an NFL stadium, and you've got the president and the vice president. We've done Super Bowls in this building. I helped open this building years ago. It's a great facility for holding the event. Now the challenge is the Secret Service to build a perimeter and a security posture that is like a Super Bowl in, 6 days since this has been announced, and mobilize all the resources that are necessary, because they're going to go through Secret Service level screening, which is a lot different than an NFL game screening. On their side, they're mandating no bags. That's going to help. But the lines that people are going to experience, the number of federal resources, state resources, and local resources that are going to be part of this security posture are going to be very significant. But it's going to be a challenge because, you know, I've heard upwards of 400,000 people have registered with Turning Point to come to this event. So if you get 100,000 or 150,000, you've got some real people challenges on your hand. And that perimeter, that outer perimeter where people are standing in line, that's a challenge because that provides risk.
See, Dan brings up a great point here, Paul. And my understanding is you may have a concern about a disruption happening, right? You might have a ton of law enforcement presence taking every security protocol, but how do you manage that many people before, during, and after the event, right? What is this disruption you're concerned about?
Well, first of all, Dan is absolutely right in that the safety and security and honestly, the customer essentially experience of these 60 to 70,000 individuals in the stadium, perhaps 50,000 to 100,000 outside is paramount. And security experts like Dan are the best in the world at making those things happen. The Secret Service's challenge is how do they move the president and the vice president and other cabinet members through those 60,000 people without overly disrupting the safety and security of those people or putting them at risk. My fear is the typical idea that threats at a venue like this do not originate on the stage where the Secret Service focuses its attention. They originate on the perimeter, just as we saw in Butler or we saw in Utah. It was a rooftop outside of the perimeter or something that was not being watched. The SEER designation or the SEER 1 level designation of this event amplifies and elevates the importance of that synchronization, the Secret Service with their federal assets and the FBI and ATF working in concert with the state and local authorities, as well as the private venue security that are critical. We rely on them for the outer perimeter and knowing how to move people in and around this absolutely excellent venue. But they rely on us to bring federal technologies that might not be available and intelligence streams that they would not normally have access to.
Dan, that is a point with the perimeter, right? Is there going to be vehicle cutoffs? What is that cutoff? How can you look at any nearby adjacent buildings? You look at a stadium like that, I don't think it was ever thought to be designed for an event like this, but you wonder what's built around it, what's nearby, what are the vulnerabilities? How do they measure that, going back to that idea of the perimeter?
Well, I mean, Paul hit it dead on. You've got the perimeter that you can secure. And the Secret Service is really focused on those dignitaries, the president, the vice president, and the others that you just put on the screen. The guest experience to try and get the rest of the people in and look at that outer perimeter and the number of vehicles, DPS, all of those agencies are going to be looking at, do we cut off vehicle access to the highway that leads to the building when we get to a certain number so we can control the number of people that come to this footprint? But Jesse, your point about the adjacency, you've got a hotel, you've got this big entertainment plaza, you've got the arena that's for overflow. There's a lot of opportunity for risk here. There's a lot of opportunity for someone with bad intentions to do something well outside of that secure perimeter that all of those agencies have partnered together to create a great, I mean, inside that perimeter is gonna be the safest place in the world. But just outside of it is where the risk is. And they have to deploy those resources and be looking at those crowds and say, hey, how do we cut off the number of people that have already come into this footprint? Because we can't control this footprint any further. And then there's the protest activity that is also something that they have to be looking at.
Paul? Yeah.
And I'd like to add for context that the SEER 1 designation is critical because normally whenever the president or the vice president comes to a venue like this, clearly the Secret Service takes command and control of the security of the venue. However, a SEER 1 designation, like an NSSC designation for a larger event with longer planning, allows federal assets to be used to make the public a protectee of the Secret Service. Those assets, the intelligence, the coordination is used to protect the public as well. And that's a critical designation for people's comfort to coming to these things. That convention center that Dan mentioned in the hotel, and the things along that perimeter, that convention center is less than 200 yards from the north entrance to this venue. The public beforehand, the public afterwards, like people may breathe a sigh of relief when the president and the vice president leave, but that public is still at risk potentially. You have vehicle-borne. You could have groups that just seek to disrupt it. What we've seen recently is foreign elements have gone online to foment more discord. They like to find these cracks in the political discourse and pour gasoline on them.
Who are you talking about, Paul?
Excuse me?
Who are you talking about when you talk about fomenting disruption online, and particularly when we have big events like this? Which kind of countries, bad actors, are you looking at?
Well, generally, it's the same in any cybersecurity space where they try to disrupt the national discourse. That can be the Russians, that can be Iranians, it can be Chinese, it can be Bulgarian. There can be a number, but it's not to say that those countries, but there are organized criminal groups or terrorist groups aligned that may seek to find those weak points in the attack surface where they can amp up the volume and reach a person, like we've seen, sadly, far too often. If they find a young person with mental instability and a grievance and a gun where they feel the need to act, you can only protect people so much. If someone has decided that's their moment, they're going to act. You hope that all of these things in place, working in concert, private security, public security, can be effective.
Dan, I'm listening to this. I'm thinking about this event. I'm thinking about Charlie Kirk. We have this special that we have airing tonight with Leland. How do you protect public events, political events in the future? Not everything's going to be a Charlie Kirk memorial where the president and the vice president attend, and you have the resources of the federal government, you have Secret Service, still going back to what security he had that day, whether or not the police could have been a part of it. How on earth do you protect political speeches, political events? I don't care if it's right. I don't care if it's left. What do you do in the future?
You know, the challenge is with less resources, because you're not getting all of the federal resources for these, smaller political events, but you still have to pull together a strategic plan. You have to create a perimeter, and you have to have that situational awareness. When we at Stratoscope, when we go out and do these events, we're looking at rooftops, we're putting up video surveillance with analytics, but we're pushing the perimeter out as far as we can. We want to make it accessible, though. We want to make sure that that guest experience is still great, and the guest still gets to get that one-on-one. In Charlie Kirk's, example, when he held, rallies and speeches, he wanted that one-on-one with his guests. We still got to create that. We got to give the speaker the opportunity to have that, but by doing that, we create risk. So,
and that's the point. So Dan, Erica Kirk is planning to take over for Charlie. She is planning to go back and do what he did. And if anybody has seen the cesspool that has been online the past week and a half with comments about his assassination and her, you have to wonder, is this a danger for her? Going and doing the same thing, what would you advise to her team?
You have to get a security team outside of executive protection, right? Charlie had a handful of guys to protect him where he was speaking. I understand that the campus police had like a half a dozen officers. It's not enough for that risk level. So putting up a perimeter, screening guests, you don't have to screen them the same way that the Secret Service does for a presidential event. There's different ways to screen and make sure that I've mitigated the threat of that handgun or that explosive. And then I'm looking at my high points. Let's take care of rooftops. Let's secure those areas. I think that's really critical going forward. And we got to, the key thing here is it's not business as usual, right? We had this event last year. We'll do it the same way this year. Well, the political, the socioeconomic, all of those things are changing in real time. We have to change with those when we're looking at any public event. We had a shareholder meeting in New York and we lost the CEO of a healthcare company. It's a public event. So putting a plan in place and making sure you have a professional event security company involved in pulling that together is the critical piece that needs to happen for all of these events to make them safe. We want to make them safe for the speaker, the talent, whatever it happens to be, but we've got to make it safe for the guests.
Look, I think we hit on a number of important points with this security. We're hoping that it is safe. We're hoping that it's secure. But I'll just go back to the point that I mentioned with Leland. I still believe that this is an event not only to honor and memorialize Charlie Kirk, but it is sending a message after he was publicly assassinated to have such a public event. It seems that they are saying we're not backing down anytime soon. I hope we never see anything like this, but we'll be a very careful eye about what happens. Paul Eckloff, Dan Donovan, thank you both so much. Great having you.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks, Paul.
You got it. Now, NewsNation, as I said, is going to be covering this memorial live on Sunday, and Leland Vittert will be covering it. All right, coming up. Now, authorities have made it very clear that they not only have the man responsible for assassinating Charlie Kirk, but they are sure what his motive for the killing was, that it was just pure hatred of Kirk's beliefs and politics. And if you look at the evidence, it is pretty strong. But despite all of that, conspiracy theories surrounding his murder, they have run amok on social media. Everything from Israeli forces assassinated him to blaming Trump. What is going on? So how do these things start? What do we do to stop them? And is this going to lead to something far worse? We're going to talk about it next. Joining me now is disinformation expert Mike Rothschild and former FBI and CIA Special Agent Tracy Walder. Great to have you both here. Mike, how do these spread? And by the way, why are we seeing so many anti-Semitic conspiracy theories right now?
Well, as I wrote about in one of my books, all conspiracy theories essentially have a hint of anti-Semitism, and all anti-Semitism is based around conspiracy theories. It's very natural for an unexpected traumatic event like Charlie Kirk's murder, caught on camera in front of hundreds of people, instantly broadcast around the world, to send people spinning off into wild theories of what happened, why it happened, who did it. We had no idea for almost 2 days. That is a petri dish where conspiracism and paranoia are going to grow. And everyone is going to latch onto a different theory based on whatever your own personal beliefs are. Whatever you wanted the shooting to be, for that, it was you. And it spreads instantly on social media.
By the way, Mike, should we trust you? Aren't you a Rothschild? Aren't you behind everything?
I am a Rothschild. I'm not one of the Rothschilds. If I were, I would be living on my yacht and counting my paintings.
Okay, great, because I thought that was a room on your yacht. I was mistaken. Okay, Tracy, let me go to you. There is a difference, right, between hate speech. There's a difference between free speech. There's a difference between inciting violence. What is the role of the FBI, for example, in trying to stop these conspiracy theories? Because on one hand, people can have a right to believe and think what they want. Where does it cross the line? When does the FBI get involved?
Well, you're absolutely right. There obviously is a fine line, and the FBI cannot legally investigate someone that they just don't agree with or says something that may be incendiary. But where it starts to cross the line is where I do think it has a direct result in violence or is obviously condoning or threatening violence. That's where it crosses the line. But it becomes very, very difficult for the FBI to investigate this. And I've talked about this before because a lot of this is happening. A lot of these conspiracy theories are really being promoted on social media and channels like Discord. And the problem with that is the FBI can't just insert someone in there in an undercover fashion like they may do in sort of pedophilia rings and those kinds of things. You actually have to become friendly with these individuals and cultivate a relationship. It's very similar to what we had to do with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. They have to know you to let you in. And then that becomes really, really difficult to find out exactly what's going on and whether or not people are going to act on violence in these conspiracy theories.
You know, Tracy Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, has said that he would be in favor of getting rid of Section 230. That obviously provides a shield of protection to platforms from being sued for what people post on their platforms. Would you be in favor of that too? Could that ultimately result in platforms maybe silencing a lot of this garbage?
I think yes and no. I think a lot of these platforms are driven by money, right? That's ultimately what drives a lot of them, in my opinion. And I think obviously we cannot infringe on individuals' right to freedom of speech. But at the same time, when you have videos such as a graphic video of Charlie Kirk's death essentially being forwarded all over social media with no warnings whatsoever, we really need to hold some of these providers accountable, and maybe putting some caveats in Section 230 might be helpful.
That's a great point. I mean, great point. That was circulated. I was in a group chat That was the first time I saw it. No one gave any warning. It was shared so easily. Mike, do you think there's a role for social media companies here? What should that role be, particularly when you're seeing it just getting more and more and more toxic so quickly?
Well, social media companies have the role in policing their own content. I think it is entirely appropriate for a social media company to see a close-up video of a man being shot in the neck and say, "We don't want this. No, we don't allow this here." Instead, it was allowed to ping pong around the world before anyone really did anything about it. We have seen that over and over and over with social media, where graphic videos, conspiracy theories, manifestos are allowed to circulate with absolutely no one doing anything about it, because a lot of these companies don't want to seem like they're censoring anybody. They shouldn't be censoring anybody, but they have rules, and they should be enforcing those rules. And I think one of those rules should be, we don't allow videos of people being murdered to be passed around.
And Tracy, what about the actors? I talked about this in the last part. Russia, China, Iran, aren't they playing a role on social media? Aren't they playing a role in information that may be being spread, or am I being cynical?
You are not being cynical. Our enemies are absolutely loving this. There's no question. They love this division because it takes our eye off of the national security ball, if you will. The reality is Russia would love for us to be distracted from Ukraine. Iran would love for us to be distracted from the Middle East. And Russia and Iran are sort of the two biggest players. Obviously, China plays a role in terms of hacking, but Russia and Iran are two of the largest players in terms of really trying to spread disinformation using our social media platforms. And that's another caveat that needs to be put in. They shouldn't be allowed to do this.
It is so disturbing on so many different levels. I'm happy we had a chance to talk a little bit more about it, get a sense of what's going on. Mike Rothschild, Tracy Walder, thank you so much. Mike, enjoy your yacht. I know you've been lying. I can't believe anything you've been saying, so really appreciate you both. Thank you.
Yeah.
You got it. All right, up next. It's major development in another attempted assassination, the 2022 assassination attempt against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Remember that? Well, the man who attempted to kill Kavanaugh now identifies as a transgender woman, and the DOJ is seeking a 30-year sentence. So with this new twist, does this change the outcome of this case? We're going to debate it next. You know, many of us had forgotten that an assassin tried to take the life of conservative Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. The man who committed that crime pled guilty, and the DOJ is pushing for a 30-year prison sentence. But there is a twist, one you probably didn't hear of. That person now identifies as a trans woman. And there has been a lot of talk online and in the media about whether there is a link between mental illness and being transgender. So the question I thought about was, are we going to start seeing attorneys using a mental health defense for their trans clients? Let's talk about it. I want to bring in criminal trial attorney Sarah Azari and former prosecutor Nima Rahmani. It's great to have you both here. Sarah, I'm going to start with you because you're with me. Good to see you. Okay.
See you too.
Let's first start just basically mental illness in this case. Do you think it's going to have an effect on sentencing? Should it? Because the prosecution says it does not excuse what the person did.
It certainly doesn't excuse it, Jesse, and he's already pled. But in the context of sentencing, mental illness is a mitigating factor, right? Here we have a lot of aggravating factors, the way that he deliberated, premeditated, and planned this assassination plot. But mental illness is a personal characteristic that the judge is supposed to take into consideration in fashioning the right sentence. The problem I have with this is that being trans is a gender identification issue. It's not a mental illness, and it further stigmatizes both communities.
This is my concern. People will read this and say they're talking a lot about well-documented mental health problems for this person. Mm-hmm. This person admitted it, and it comes out today that this person is now identifying as trans. And people are I am wondering, are you going to have defense attorneys now trying to make that connection?
Well, I certainly hope not, because the two are not to be confounded. I think if someone independently of their gender identification has mental illness, that's certainly something to argue in mitigation of the crime at sentencing, and it has to be considered by the judge. But being trans and just saying, oh, well, this person's trans, so they're mentally ill, that's a terrible insult to the trans community, and it further stigmatizes the mentally ill individuals.
That's what you're seeing online, unfortunately. And so, Nima, there's a difference difference between what you're seeing online, a lot of people saying, but again, it raises this point. Is this now a new paradigm shift? Is this now a new potential legal defense we're going to be seeing?
Well, Jesse, we see all sorts of things online, and Sarah's absolutely right. You know, there's the law and there's politics, and here you have a political layer on top of this. The reality is, and look, I like Justice Kavanaugh. I was at the Supreme Court earlier this year, by all accounts. Very nice guy, but he was a very polarizing Supreme Court nominee. His confirmation was bruising. There are a lot of people that think he sexually assaulted someone. Really, I mean, him and Clarence Thomas, probably the two most difficult Supreme Court confirmations I've seen. So now you have this transgender issue on top of it. You're really throwing fuel on the political fire in this case. So, you know, obviously, Sarah and I, me, you, Jesse, we're all lawyers, so we view it through a legal lens, but a lot of people that are watching right now aren't going to view it the same way. So you got the politics, you got the gender identity. It's very hard to sift through and sort through everything.
Nima, let me just stick with you. My understanding is the defense team hasn't presented a filing in response to what the prosecution said, where they're recommending 30 years. It comes out today that their client wants to be identified as a female. In their filing, asking for leniency, is this identity shift, is the client now being considered transgender, is that going to play a role, a legal role? Is it going to help in any way or hurt in any way?
Well, it's going to play a role because the defendant is going to be referred to as Sophie and not Nicholas. So it's going to play some sort of role. But I think the defense is going to focus on the lengthy documented mental health issues dating back to the time that this individual was 19 years old. I mean, he wanted to kill his sister, right? He was talking about suicide leading up to this. Again, I'm a former prosecutor, you know, so you know which way I lean, Jesse, but I know what the defense is going to try to do. They're going to try to shave off some time to try to get this individual less than 30 years. So they're going to throw everything out there. I don't think the gender identity issue is going to really move the ball here, but all the other mental health stuff, that's really all they have here because it's such a strong case for the prosecution otherwise.
And by the way, Sarah, a lot of people don't remember what happened here. If it wasn't for a 911 phone call and speaking to a family member, this person who showed up had very concerning items with them.
Oh, yeah.
This could have been a disaster. What do you think the sentence is going to be?
Well, look, the prosecution's asking for 30 years. The guidelines, which, you know, we don't have a statutory mandatory minimum here, but it's a maximum of life. So it's 30 to life under the guidelines. The defense is essentially going to come in and want a variance to go below 30 years. The judge has the absolute power to go below or above the guidelines, up to life. It's totally within the judge's discretion. And obviously, like Nima said, it's the mitigating factors and how much they're going to sway the judge. But I think given the evidence here and how deliberate and planned this plot was, I'm not sure the judge is going to go below the guidelines. The guidelines are advisory, of course.
Nima, you mentioned something. Now, I want to go to this. You mentioned Justice Kavanaugh. Now that this has come out, that this person identifies as transgender, the person who almost assassinated him, does Justice Kavanaugh have to recuse himself from any future transgender cases? I mean, what just came out today, that the Supreme Court was asked about passport sex markers for transgender individuals. Does Justice Kavanaugh have to recuse himself from any transgender rights cases?
I don't think so, Jesse. I mean, the Supreme Court hears so many cases, and you're talking about, obviously, one individual case. It was an attempt on his life, but there's not an actual conflict of interest. There's no appearance of impropriety. He hasn't said that he can't be impartial. And the Supreme Court is handling cases that affect everyone and everything, right? Think of all the immigration issues, the women's rights issues. I mean, if this were a basis for recusal.
But a transgender person almost assassinated him.
Well, but also, listen.
Hold on one sec, Sarah. Nima, real quick.
Yeah, I mean, look, if it was a person of color, if it was a white man, I mean, what's the difference? The gender identity, in my opinion, doesn't have anything to do with the legal case or the merits of the case. This is an attempted assassin who happens to be transgender. It doesn't matter if they identified as a male, woman, white, black, some other race. Really, I mean, it's not a basis for recusal.
Yeah, but also, with all due respect to the Supreme Court, in case I end up there anytime soon, there's no shame in that game. Remember last year, Justice Thomas sat on the case of Trump versus United States over the January 6th insurrection, even though his wife, Ginny, was deeply involved in the overturning of the election. So I don't think being trans is, I agree with Nima, I don't think that's enough to have to recuse himself.
Want a little secret? I don't think so either, but I thought it was really interesting because I'm sure people are going to be making that argument sooner rather than later when this announcement came up. That was my take. Nima, when you listen to this, I mean, this was a big development today, particularly after what has just happened with Charlie Kirk and the revelations that were made regarding the communications with this roommate who is transgender. And this now fuels a conversation, again, particularly online. The show's been a lot about what's happening online. Nima, do you have any concerns about it?
I don't. Obviously, look, the Charlie Kirk case is certainly not going to help this individual sentence. That's why I think he's likely, or they are likely, going to get 30 years, or certainly well over 20 years in this case because of the climate that we're in. But look, the reality is this. There are more people identifying as transgender now. Just from a pure numbers perspective, right? There are going to be more violent crimes committed by transgender people because there's more people identifying as trans. Just like there's a lot more people that have autism right now, right? So we're going to see a lot more crimes committed by people who are on the spectrum. It's purely a numbers game. Again, I don't think there's a direct correlation there.
Yeah. I don't think so either, but, interesting point nonetheless. Nima Rahmani, Sarah Zari, good to see you both. Thanks so much.
Good to see you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, up next, we got to talk about these new vaccine mandates. I'm about to become a first-time dad, and let me tell you, I don't know what to do. The vaccine issue is just so prevalent, and there is so much confusion right now for people like me and my wife. What is going on? Are these decisions being based on science? Are politics driving the new policies? Well, I'll tell you what, I've got the former head of the CDC and a pediatrician to help a new parent like me, a lot of them out there, to get answers that I think we all need. That's up next. My wife and I are expecting our first child in just a couple of weeks. And I will tell you, these new advisories on vaccines have only created more confusion for people like us. I know you feel it. This week, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, they voted to split up the vaccines for measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox into separate shots. What does that mean? Now, the panel, they decided not to make a decision about whether or not newborns should get the hepatitis B vaccine, so that creates even more confusion for people like me. Are these recommendations based on medical science? Are they based on politics? Because there's one thing I know for sure. Most parents, they just want to keep their children healthy, and they do not give a damn about the politics. So here to help me make an educated decision for my own family, hopefully for you, former CDC Director Robert Redfield and Dr. Florence Rosen. Great to have you both here. Thank you so much. Okay, so real quick, I just want to talk about COVID, where now there is a limit to, this being limited to people 65 and older. Dr. Redfield, they also say consult with your doctor. What's wrong with consulting with your doctor?
No, I think it's great to consult with your doctor. The COVID vaccines don't prevent infection. And they really do modify disease for people at risk for bad disease. They probably always should have been recommended for the vulnerable, those over 65. And unfortunately, they were recommended for the broader population. So I actually think they're bringing these recommendations back to where they belong. But you can still talk to your doctor and see what they think for you.
Dr. Rosen, do you agree, or do you believe that parents, particularly of young children, again, I'm in this position, do you think it's important they get vaccinated for COVID?
Well, first of all, let me congratulate you on your upcoming child.
Thank you. Appreciate
I think that's great.
Thank you.
As far as COVID goes, this is really an interesting time because this is honestly the first time in my very long career that I see a real discrepancy between the CDC and the AAP. American Academy of Pediatrics. And the evidence that I see from the AAP and what I've looked at is that kids under 2 are at very significant risk. In fact, the greatest risk is under 6 months, but those kids are too young to get immunized. So, particularly if you are a parent and you have a toddler in the house and you're expecting another child, you really want to limit your child's exposure as much as you possibly can. So I think it really is important for kids 6 months to 2 to get their shots. And I think beyond that, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends any child with any underlying disease. And I think it's critical. One of the reasons why we're seeing so much less terrible disease is obviously the virus is mutated. Well, that's great, but people have also gotten vaccines and they've also been infected. If you have someone that's totally naive to this illness, they could still potentially get very sick.
I want to put the COVID to the side because we can debate that one. It's the MMRV one I'm just really confused about. Dr. Redfield, splitting it up, good thing, bad thing? I mean, it's been done, there's this one shot for so long.
I think you have to look at the data in terms of side effects and toxicity. Obviously, the committee was concerned that the inclusion of the varicella component to it was associated with increased brain swelling in younger children. Now, they do recommend both the MNR and they do recommend a separate varicella. So it's not like anybody is denied any vaccine if they want it as childhood vaccines. I think it's a problem when people start rationalizing that we have to make this easier for people. Let's just put it all together in one vaccine. I'm not an advocate of that. I actually think the committee came out with a reasonable recommendation. I wasn't there to see all the data, and my colleague here on the pediatric side may have more, but I know there was concerns about the brain swelling consequences, and so they said, let's split them up.
And Dr. Rosen, do you think this is a good change? I mean, is this even that much of a change when you think about it?
No, it's actually very minimal.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is the statistic I saw is that 80% of pediatricians are already not taking them combined between the MMR and the varicella as 2 separate shots for kids under 4. When kids get their booster between 4 and 6, that's where some doctors will do the MMRV. And I think this change is a very minimal change, but it does err on the side of safety. So I actually agree with this.
Okay, and hepatitis B, Dr. Redfield, they kind of punted it. It was a whole question about whether newborns should get it. They didn't make a decision. What should I be taking away from that?
Well, this is my expertise historically, and I really don't believe that the hepatitis vaccine is a critical vaccine for children and newborns. I think it's something we got to get into adolescent vaccines along with human papillomavirus. But they decided to punt it because they want to see all of the data. I'm glad that they really underscored the importance of all pregnant women being screened for hepatitis B, because if you're hepatitis B positive, those children do need to be vaccinated. So I suspect they're going to debate it a little more. They want to see the data in terms of how much data do we have about safety and efficacy in immunizing children under the age of 1 month.
So Dr. Rosen, we got about 20 seconds left. Your take on it, if it's ultimately a decision on it, should every parent consider hepatitis B for their children, the vaccine?
I think yes, because I think the risks are minimal. And the incidence of chronic hepatitis B went down from 20,000 cases to roughly 200 cases, 20 cases a year after they changed the recommendation for all newborns to get it. Now, if a mother's negative and she wants to put it off for a month, you're taking a very minimal risk by waiting.
Okay. Look, this was helpful. Hopefully my wife was watching. Is she even watching? Hopefully she's watching. All right, Dr. Redfield, Dr. Rosen, thank you both so much, and thank you for the work that you do. Appreciate you both. You got it.
Bye-bye.
All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. I'm Jesse Weber in for Chris Cuomo, and I am joined right now by Leland Vittert, who is outside Turning Point headquarters in Phoenix, who, by the way, is going to have special coverage tonight, and he's going to be anchoring our coverage of Charlie Kirk's memorial on Sunday. Leland, good to see you once again. So what's the scene like?
Jesse, I think what you understand when you spend time with people who were followers of Charlie Kirk and fans is how much they all felt like they knew him personally, even if they didn't. And he had an amazing connection, and I was fortunate enough to meet him on a number of occasions to spend time with him. But he was one of those people that even if you disagreed with him, you couldn't help but like him, and that came across on camera as well. He just had that it thing. So you have people who feel like they have lost a friend, even if they've never met Charlie Kirk. And you look behind me at the memorial, and yes, there's 400 or 500 feet worth of flowers and flags and everything else. But also, this is what Charlie Kirk built. 31 years old, and had built a $100+ million a year business and political action committee and influence and TV show and all of these things. And I think in life, at least I didn't, even though I covered politics so much, really quite understand what his influence was.
And I'm interested in learning a little bit more. I know you're going to be covering it for the next hour, and I toss it to you, Leland Vittert.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.